Good morning, everyone. Very welcome to today's lecture. We are continuing with our BPSC 146, that is conflict resolution and peace building. So we started with this paper in our last session. This is the second session of this session of this paper, where we are learning about how conflict is resolved and how to build peace when there is a conflict. In my last session, we have discussed about Unit 1 in detail, and we completed the first half of Unit 2 in our previous session. Today, we are going to know about the second part of Unit 2, which is Sources of Conflict, Part 2. So, let's start with sources of conflict. We have done it in our previous session, the part 1. Today, we are continuing with it. Today we will be learning about sources of conflict 2. So, the second sources of conflict are human based, and these may be individuals, groups, parties, states, or nations. So, what is the characteristics of sources of conflict which we are reading today is that these sources are human based. So, it could be individuals, it could be groups, it could be parties, it could be states or nations, which include human beings. So, let's start with the first sources of conflict, which is human based, is interpersonal conflict. Interpersonal conflict occurs when two people have incompatible needs, goals, or approaches in their relationship. So, when we say that there is an interpersonal conflict, when there are two people who have incompatible needs, they have different sets of goals, they approach life differently, and they approach their relationship differently, is when there arises the interpersonal conflict. Communication breakdown is often an important source of interpersonal conflict. So, when there are two people who wanted to, there is a relationship between them, and there is no communication. So when there is no communication between two person, this source of interpersonal conflict arises, and it became a very important source for these conflicts to arise. So do remember that interpersonal conflict includes two or more people, and they should have different sets of their needs, their approaches should be different, their goals should be different, and when there is lack of communication, the this become the major source for the interpersonal conflict. Hence, learning communication skills is valuable in preventing and resolving such difficulties. So, now we have learned that why this interpersonal conflict arises. Two reasons are there: when people have different needs, different approaches, different goals, and secondly, when there is miscommunication or no communication at all. In this situation, we learned that we should learn communication skills, which is very very valuable, so that we can prevent this interpersonal conflict to arise, and if arised, there should be communication which can resolve these difficulties. So this is interpersonal conflict. At the same time, very real differences occur between people that cannot be resolved by any amount of improved communication. So there is at the same time, there are very real differences which occurs between people, which is very impossible to be resolved. So personality conflict refers to very strong differences in motives, values, or styles in dealing with people. So what are these differences which are very impossible and very difficult to resolve? Is personality conflict. When two people have different kind of personality and there arises the conflict, it is a very strong difference between their motives, their values, and how they deal with people, and this is why few interpersonal conflicts are very important to be resolved, but it takes amount of improved communication cannot be resolving. In such conflicts, both parties have a high need for power. Both want to be dominant in a relationship. There is no way for both to be satisfied. Thus, a power struggle ensues. So, when interpersonal conflict arises, when there is high need for power from both the parties, when it is involving two people, two individuals, both of them wanted to have high need for power. They both want to have the dominant position in their relationship, and there is no way for both to be satisfied. When they are not satisfied with their positions, their power relations, then comes the power struggle, which ultimately leads to the interpersonal conflict. There are common tactics that is used in interpersonal power struggle that includes exaggerated use of rewards and punishments. This is very important because these are the ways, these are the tactics through which these power struggles are exaggerated, like by using rewards and punishments, deception and evasions, threats and emotional blackmail, and flattery and ingratiation. So these are the tactics used. So which is used in interpersonal power struggle by both the parties. So unresolved power conflict usually recycles and escalates to the point to the breakdown of relationship and its termination. Now, let's move on to the second source of conflict, that is role conflict. Role conflict involves very real differences in role definitions, expectations, or responsibilities between individuals who are interdependent in a social system. So, understand this, role conflict involves real differences in role definitions, how they are being expected, and what are their responsibilities between the individuals who are interdependent in the social system. So, if there are ambiguities in the role definition in an organization or unclear boundaries of responsibilities persist, then the stage is set for the interpersonal friction between persons involved. So this role conflict, because they don't know what is their particular role, there is not clear cut role, the roles are unclear. In that sense, there arises this interpersonal friction. Unfortunately, the conflict is often misdiagnosed as interpersonal conflict rather than role conflict. So it is because of their roles, their responsibilities, whose boundaries are unclear, but it is considered to be interpersonal only, and it is rather than the role conflict. So there is a difference between interpersonal conflict and role conflict, but many times they are, interchangeably used. Unfortunately, they are interchangeably used. So these role conflicts and resolutions are then complicated and misdirected. So the emotional intensity is often quite high in role conflict since people are directly involved as individuals, and there is a strong tendency to personalize the conflict. So this is very important point which comes under role conflict, is that the emotional intensity of the people who are involved in this role conflict is very very high, and people are directly involved in this role conflict, and they wanted to personalize the conflict, which is arising from their responsibilities, the unclear boundaries of their responsibilities. This is tenable for leadership of states and nations also. Now, let's move on to intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict occurs between collections of people such as ethnic or racial groups, departments or levels of decision making in the same organization, and union and management. So this is about a group, intergroup. In our first session, we have discussed about groups, intra-groups, intergroups. We have discussed about it. So it will be easier for you to understand this. So intergroup conflict, when does it arise? It arises when it is there, the conflict occurs between the collections of people, such as there are different ethnic groups, racial groups, there are departments in a particular organizations who have a group of people there, and also there are union and management. So when there arises a problem, this conflict is known as intergroup conflict. There is competition for scarce resources is a common source of intergroup conflict. So what are the cause for intergroup conflict? One of the major cause of intergroup conflict is competition for scarce resources. When there are more people but the resources are very limited, at that point this intergroup conflict arises. Their societies have developed numerous regulatory mechanisms with collective bargaining and mediation for dealing with such conflict is less disruptive ways. So there are many conflicts that arises because of lack of resources, but society tried their best to find out and to develop numerous regulatory mechanisms so that they can keep the conflict less disruptive. Otherwise it will be a more bigger issue. So how they used to do it, they used collective bargainings and mediations so that this conflict remains a less disruptive. Social and psychological processes are very important in intergroup conflict. This is also a very important point to note down, is that there is social and psychological processes which are very important in intergroup conflicts. In intergroup conflict, group members tend to develop stereotypes. What are these stereotypes? Basically, oversimplified. Most of the time, it's negative. There are beliefs and practice discrimination against them. So there is a kind of stereotype that is attached with group members of a particular ethnicity, particular racial group, and because of that, they practice discrimination against them. These classic symptoms of intergroup conflict can be just as evident in organization as in race relations in community settings. So suppose there is a country A and there are two different ethnic groups who live there, but one ethnic group particularly stereotypes that their beliefs are that the another group is they are bad, they are not good enough, they are not of pure race, and because of that they start practicing discrimination. So these kinds of stereotypes are very harmful because it gives way to discrimination. It give rise to discrimination against them, which ultimately lead to a intergroup conflict, so which hampers peace. So this, because of this intergroup conflict, there is peace which is hampered, and there is many ways through which this peace is restored, which we are reading in this paper. So intergroup conflict is especially tense and prone to escalation. So there is always a possibility that this intergroup conflict will escalate further, because this stereotypical behaviors, this discrimination goes on, which ultimately gave voice to the people who are being discriminated, and there arises the voice, there arises the the conflict. They started backfiring, and that is how this intergroup conflict escalates. Intractability persists when group identities are threatened. When these conflicts became a major issue, when a particular group feels that their identities are threatened by someone else, and when this happens, they become very vigilant, they become very aware about their rights, and this is how this intergroup conflict escalates. The cost of destructive intergroup conflict can be extremely high for a society in both economic and social terms. So this is also very important, because intergroup conflict doesn't consist of only one or two individual. We are talking about a group. This group can be this can be a group of 5, group of 10, maybe group of 5 lakhs, maybe group of 10 lakhs. So we don't know how much population is there in this particular group. So if that much population is being threatened, they are discriminated there, then arises the conflict. The destruction is also very, very huge, because they are not only handful of people, there is a big group that is behind. And when two ethnic groups are against each other, or two ethnic, or you can say racial groups are against each other, they consist of a huge population. And that is why the destruction is also very, very huge, which impacts the economy as well as the social, environment of a particular society, particular country. So let's move forward to multi-party conflict. So this is the fourth source of conflict, that is multi-party conflict. In multi-party conflict, how when does it occurs? It occurs in societies when different interest groups and organizations have varying priorities over resource management and policy development. Suppose there are many interest groups, there are many organizations that is there in our country, and they all wanted their way, which should be adopted to manage the resources and to develop the policy. When this conflict, when they come together and they wanted their best way to be adopted, this is the time when multi-party conflict arises. These complex conflicts typically involve a combination of economic, value, and power sources. So these complex conflicts, they involve what? They involve a combination of economy, value, and power sources. This complexity is often intertwined and sometimes predominate beyond the reach of traditional authoritative or adversarial procedures. So, more collaborative approaches to building consensus are needed for resolution of such conflicts. So, how this multi-party conflict can be resolved? There is a need of much collaborative approaches so that there is a consensus should be built. If there is a consensus on a particular issue or a particular policy, then only this multi-party conflict can be handled properly. Now let's move on to international conflict. International conflict occurs between states at the global level. As the name suggests, it is between nations. International means among nations. So this conflict emerges among nations, and it occurs when there are two or three states who are involved at the global level. This international conflict is not between individuals, not between a group, not between organizations, but now it involves nations, it involves states. Competition for resources certainly plays a part, but value and power conflicts are often intertwined and sometimes predominant. So, what are the reasons behind this international conflict? So, one of the major reason is resources, because as we all know that there is scarce resources available and their population is very huge. So each and every nation wants resources as much as they can, and that is why there is a competition of resources, and this is a reason why the international conflict arises. But this is not the sole reason. Along with this resources, there is also value and power conflicts. They, each and every country, according to the realist ideology, each and every nation wants to maximize their power. To maximize their power, there arises conflict, because to maximize they use many tactics to maximize, which sometimes irks the other one. And these power conflicts, this value conflicts, and resource, scarce resources sometimes are intertwined. It is not that only this particular issue is for this conflict and that particular issue is really because of this conflict. No, many times all these issues are intertwined, all these issues are predominating in generating an international conflict. Differences between states are articulated through the channels of diplomacy in a consistent and constant game and of give and take, or threat and counter threat, sometimes for the highest stakes. So these states, there is a diplomacy which works, and there is a consistent and constant game that is being played by the nations of give and take. You give me something, I will give you something. In return of this thing, you take this thing. There is also threat and counter threat. We are threatening a particular country, and in return, they are threatening by using a bigger power's name. So these are the games that is being played at the world politics, and these are many times is at highest stakes. So there are mechanisms of propaganda which can lead to many of the same social psychological distortions that characterizes interpersonal and intergroup conflict. So this is the way through which the conflict arises, not only at the interpersonal level but also international, intergroup, which we have studied. Now let's move on to variants of threats in international conflict. What are the threats that comes in? So in international conflict, there are three kinds of threats. Please do remember these three kinds of threats. And the first threat is the threat of punishment. Second is the threat of conquest. And the third is the threat of annihilation. These are the three kinds of threats that you can count in international conflict. So let's start with the first threat, that is the threat of punishment. Between two unconditionally viable states or nations, the threat of punishment is the only significant threat, as neither can conquer nor annihilate the other. So there is a threat of punishment because nobody, neither one of them can conquer the other, and nor can they annihilate. So one nation can, however, make things uncomfortable for another by military action, and so may be able to sway the policies of other nation in its favor. So how there is a threat of punishment? The threat of punishment includes when a particular country is making the other one uncomfortable by using using particular military action, or able to persuade others, sway others to develop a policy which is in favor of themselves and not the other one. So the problem with punishment, especially between relative equals, is that the traditional plaint of the angry parent, it hurts me more than it hurts you, though rarely believed by the victim, has truth in it. So the infliction of punishment is costly for the punisher as well as the punished. So, quite apart from any retaliatory action, and the threat of punishment is correspondingly less effective as its costs increases. So, this threat of punishment is something which is basically, when there is you know uh, unconditional viable states, there is two unconditional viable states, and this can only be significant threat as neither can conquer nor they can annihilate the other. Next variant of threats in international conflict is the threat of conquest. So the threat of conquest becomes possible when a nation is no longer unconditionally. This is very important, which separates and which differentiates between the threat of punishment and threat of conquest. So, in the expansion of empires, this threat has been used with powerful effect. The British Empire at its height was masterly example of the use of the threat of conquest to organize a vast heterogeneous domain. So there was a threat to conquest the land, and this is how the British Empire expanded. In India, a mosaic of princely states in the matrix of British India, which is directly governed by the representatives of the crown, testified to the effective use of a combination of actual and threatened conquest. Now, the last variant of threat, that is the threat of annihilation. Threat of annihilation is the third threat. It is not altogether new. This is not something very new. This threat system, especially when the powers of annihilation are mutual, is intolerable and introduces a condition of desperate instability in international relations. So, this is the threat of annihilation for us. Now, let's talk about the fourth threat of offensive and defensive weapons. So, the distinction between offensive and defensive weapons is not always easy to draw, but it clearly represents an important difference. So, there is a difference in the offensive and defensive weapon. Thus, a shield, a city wall, a bomb shelter is purely defensive armaments. When you wanted to save yourself, defense. When you wanted to save yourself, offense. When you wanted to attack someone. So this is the difference between offensive and defensive. Offensive is when you are becoming, you are becoming the arrogant, you are becoming the attacker. And when you are defensive, when you try to save yourself from the attacker. The attacker must be the third person. So, you know, they lessen the capacity of the enemy to harm, but can in no way harm them. So, its main objective is to destroy agents of the enemy that are engaged in injurious activities so that it has a defensive aspect. So, on the other hand, its defense is not passive like that of a bomb shelter, as it is aimed at injuring the aggressive agents of the enemy. So, this is the threat of offensive and defensive weapons. And throughout history, there has been a race between offensive and defensive weapons technology improvement. So, there is also, mechanisms, there is also technology which works for these offensive and defensive weapons. The increased technical efficiency of offense generally seems to precede that of defense, perhaps because the payoffs to the innovator are greater in the case of offensive weapons. So offensive weapons are more, expensive. This is because offensive weapons always have a defensive aspect. When are you making an offensive weapon, there should always be a defensive aspect. And through their power to destroy the offensive weapons of the enemy, whereas the defensive weapons seldom have an offensive aspect. So this is all about the sources of conflict and sources of threat. Now, let's move on to unit 3, that is types and levels of conflict. So, there are many types and levels of conflict, and we are going to read in this unit further. Let's start with defining conflict, which is a concept we require to have a conceptual clarification. So, the word conflict derived from the Latin word confligere, meaning to strike together. So, since our previous session, we are repeatedly using this term conflict in our entire lecture. So, what does this conflict mean? From where this conflict word originated? So, do remember that this word conflict is derived from the Latin word confligere, meaning to strike together. This exact spelling is there on your screen. You can note it down. Originally, it had a physical rather than moral connotation, though the English word has both. In the physical sense, it denotes two or more different things moving to occupy the same space at the same time. So there was a race between two or more different things who wanted to occupy a same space and also at the same time, such as there is a race, relay race, or there is a race which is going on. Everyone wanted to reach the end line, the finish line at the same time so that they can be the winner. So the logical inconsistency and the process of solution being identical. For example, the logical inconsistency of two billiard balls being in the same place at the same time is resolved by the conflict which results in their rolling to two different positions. So this is what the physical sense of conflict means. So there is no agreement among scholars on the precise meaning of the term conflict. This is also very important because scholars are not agreed upon the precise meaning of the term conflict. It has many connotations, it has many different definitions. Each thinker has given different definitions to conflict, and that is why it has many different meanings. Let's start with the definitions of George Simmel. George Simmel, whom we owe a classical analysis of various forms of conflict, insisted that conflict is a certain amount of discord, inner divergence, and outer controversy which is organically tied up with the very elements that ultimately hold the group together. So, this is the definition given by George Simmel, whom we considered as the classical analysis of various forms of conflict. So, according to him, conflict is a certain amount of discord between two individuals, you can say two groups, you can say two nations, and also it has inner divergence and outer controversy, which is organically tied up with the very elements that ultimately hold the group together. Now let's come to the definition provided by Kenneth Boulding. Kenneth Boulding defines conflict as a form of competition in which the competing parties recognize that they have mutually incompatible goals. So, this is also a very functional definition because this defines that there is a competition. Conflict is a form of a competition in which both of them recognize that they have mutually incompatible goals. So, this is what Kenneth Boulding is defining. Now let's move on to Louis Kozer. Louis Kozer, who offered one of the most influential definitions of conflict. So, according to Louis Kozer, a struggle over values and claims to scarce status, power, and resources in which the aims of the opponents are to neutralize, injure, or eliminate the rivals. So, what is the definition that is provided by Louis Kozer? It is the conflict is a struggle over values and claims to scarce status. We have repeatedly saying that it is something related to resources. Conflict is something related to resources. Here he is also saying, Kozer is also saying that it is a claim. Conflict is a claim to scarce status, power, and resources. All of these things according to Kozer is in scarce, both status, power, and resources, in which the aim of the opponents are to neutralize, injure, or eliminate the rival so that they can get those resources, that power and status. Defined thus, conflict is a comprehensive category encompassing a variety of phenomena from brawls in the bazaar to wars between nations. So, according to Louis Kozer, conflict is a comprehensive category which encompasses a variety of phenomena. It is not limited to only nations but everywhere. So, he gave example that it is a kind of brawl in the bazaar and the wars between nations. Everything is conflict. Now, let's move on to Park and Burgess write that conflict is always conscious. So, according to Park and Burgess, conflict is always conscious. Indeed, it evokes the deepest emotions and strongest passions and enlists the greatest concentration of the attention and of effort. Do note it down because these are many important definitions of conflict, because to understand this entire paper, which is about conflict and peace building, you require some definition to know it properly, that what does this word conflict mean, why we are using this conflict word in a repeated basis. So according to Park and Burgess, it is evokes that conflict evokes the deepest emotions and strongest passions and enlists the greatest concentration of attention and of effort. Both competition and conflict are forms of struggle. Whether you are competing or whether you are conflicting with one another, both are forms of struggle. And competition, however, is continuous and impersonal, whereas conflict is intermittent and personal. So Park and Burgess also give a differences between a competition and conflict. So according to them, competition is continuous and impersonal, whereas conflict is intermittent and personal. Now let's move on to Robert C. North. According to Robert C. North, a conflict emerges whenever two or more persons or groups seek to possess the same object, occupy the same space, or the same exclusive position, play incompatible goals, or undertake mutually incompatible means for achieving their purpose. So, how Robert C. North is, defining conflict? He defines that a conflict emerges whenever two or more persons or groups, whatever it is, seeks to possess the same object. They want the same object, they want to occupy the same space or the same exclusive position. They wanted to play incompatible goals, or they undertake mutually incompatible means for achieving their purpose. So this is how the conflict emerges. The conception identifying conflict with violent interactions in which behavior and perceptions are in position has remained a basic conception in conflict studies. So there is Mack and Snyder, without offering a specific definition, they identify the distinguishing characters of the range of conflict phenomena as so according to Mack and Snyder, they identify and distinguish characteristics of the range of conflict phenomena. And what are they? The first one is the existence of two or more parties. There must be two or more parties, otherwise there could be no conflict. You require two or more parties to generate a conflict. So existence of two or more parties is one of the distinguishing characteristics of the range of conflict phenomena according to Mack and Snyder. Secondly, their interaction arises from a condition of resource scarcity or position scarcity. So there must be some kind of limitation of resources, or there's some kind of scarcity of position which gives rise to conflict between them, because their interaction arises from this limited resources and limited position conditions. Thirdly, they engage in mutually opposing actions. They both are doing different things. Then only the conflict will arise. Fourthly, their behavior is intended to damage, injure, or eliminate the other party. So, this is also very important, because whatever these two parties are doing, both of them wanted to damage. They wanted to damage, injure, and eliminate the other party so that they can get the resource, they can get the position, because the position and resources both are very much limited. Fifthly, their interactions are overt and can be measured or evaluated by outside observers. So, how they are behaving, what are they doing, it can be evaluated by the outsider evaluators. Now, let's talk about Mahatma Gandhi's view of conflict. So, till now, we have studied the people from Western part of the world, what according to them is conflict. Now, let's talk about Mahatma Gandhi's view of conflict, and it is and the importance of expressing it is one of his most significant insight. He found it confirmed in the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, which is a Hindu religious scripture. So Mahatma Gandhi's source of defining conflict remains in Bhagavad Gita. So according to his interpretation, the Gita regards each person as possessing truth and untruth together. The field of battle is in our own body, Gandhi said in summarizing its teachings. So, one finds altogether a different understanding of the meaning of international conflict, civil wars, or wars in the literature on conflict. So, there are disagreements over the exact notion of the conflict as a term in the domain of international relation dominance until today. So this word conflict is one of the most dominating, uh, term which is being used in international relations even today, and it is very difficult to, give the exact notion of this term conflict. So there are many ways through which the Western authors and even Indian authors try to define conflict, but still it is very, very difficult to give the exact notion. Now let's talk about the functions and objectives of conflict. What are the functions? What are the objectives of conflict? So scholars of conflict studies do not believe, like an average person, that all conflicts are bad. So whoever is studying conflicts, the scholars does not or do not believe that all conflicts are bad, as they serve positive social functions as well. So conflict prevents the ossification of the social system by exercising pressure for innovation and creativity. So George Sorel felt that a social system was in need of conflict if only to renew its energies and revitalize its creative forces. So according to George Sorel, it is very, very important to have a conflict in a social system, because it will ultimately renew its energies and revitalize its creative forces. According to Koser, conflict within and between groups in a society can prevent accommodations and habitual relations from progressively improvising creativity. According to John Dewey, conflict is the gadfly of thought. It stirs us to observation and memory. It instigates to invention. It shocks us out of sheep like passivity and sets at the noting and contriving conflict is a sine qua non of reflection and ingenuity. So, conflict not only generates new norms and new institutions, it may also be stimulating directly in the economic and technological realm. So, in our previous session, we have learned that why all conflicts are not bad, because when women started the conflict for their right to vote, it was a positive, it bring positive change in the society. It brought positive change. So that is why all conflicts are not bad. Few conflicts also bring positive changes in the existing society. So, conflict not only generates new norms and institutions, it may also be stimulating directly in the economic and technological realm. Economic historians often have pointed out that much technological improvement has resulted from the conflict activity of trade unions through the raising of wage levels. So now let's talk about the functions and objectives of conflict, the constructive aspect. So we will be looking particularly the constructive aspect of functions and objectives of the conflict. So according to Marx, conflict leads not only to ever-changing relations within the existing social structure, but also the total social system undergoes transformation through conflict. This is something to be noted down that according to Marx, conflict leads not only to ever changing relation within the existing social system, but it also totally changes the social system because it undergoes transformation through conflict. So, a central thesis of Arnold Toynbee's monumental book, that is a study of history, reveals that a group or a system that no longer is challenged is no longer capable of creative response. So, there always be, a group which should be challenged. So it may subsist wedded to the eternal yesterday of precedent in tradition, but it is no longer capable of renewal. So most contemporary social scientists lay stress on the constructive consequences of conflict relations. Now let's see what Dubin is saying. So Dubin's five central propositions constitute a broader thesis. So, intergroup conflict is a fundamental institutionalized social process which determines the direction of the social change and, in effect, defines social welfare. So, Mack and Snyder considered that though most of his analysis is drawn from experience of industry relations, the propositions have wider applicability. So they also summarize the views of five other scholars. So conflict set groups boundaries of strengthening group cohesiveness and separateness. Secondly, conflict reduces tension and permits maintenance of social interaction under stress. Thirdly, conflict clarifies objectives. Fourthly, conflict results in the establishment of group norms. So these are the things, these are the five, they summarize the views of five scholars into these points. Lastly, without conflict, accommodative relations would result in subordination rather than agreement. So this is how they, summarizes the view of five scholars, Mack and Snyder. Now, let's move towards types and level of conflict. So, there is no agreement among scholars on types and levels of conflict. There are different scholars have identified different kinds of and types of conflict. So, what are these types? I am just reading it down. You can also see in your screen. The first is social conflict, inter-community conflicts, caste conflict, particularly in the South Asian region, you can find it, group conflicts, interpersonal conflict, intellectual conflict is also there. There is also economic conflict, cultural conflicts among various cultural groups. There is religious conflicts between religions. There is racial or ethnic conflicts. This is very common because there are many ethnicities that live together, and that is why this racial and ethnic conflicts arises. There is ideological conflict that you can see during Cold War, the ideological conflict between the USA and the USSR, where USA was supporting capitalist ideology, whereas USSR was supporting the communist ideology. There is also hot and cold conflict, north and south conflict. Here, north and south are basically the Western countries who are settled in the north part of the map, and the south are the one who are the developing and underdeveloped countries. There is also regional conflicts, and finally the international or intranational conflicts, and so on. So there are n number of conflict you can find, but these are the major conflicts that people uh, all the scholars have identified. Let's talk about types and levels of conflicts, and starting with Quincy Wright's classification. So, how Quincy Wright classified the levels and types of conflicts? Let's know. Quincy Wright was one of the earliest political scientists to make a systematic study of conflicts and war. This is very important. Please note it down that it was Quincy Wright who was one of the earliest political scientists to make a systematic study of conflicts and war. According to him, conflict can take place among different sorts of entities. It can take place among different sorts of entities, and he identifies four types of conflict. According to Quincy Wright, what are these four types of conflicts? There is physical conflict, political conflict, ideological conflict, and legal conflict. Quincy Wright distinguishes physical conflict, in which two or more entities try to occupy the same space at the same time, from political conflict, in which a group tries to impose its policy on the others. So, physical conflict, according to Wright, is that when two or more entities wanted to occupy the same space at the same time. Whereas political conflict is when a group tries to impose their policy on the others. He further distinguishes these two types of conflicts from ideological conflict, in which system of thought or of value struggles with each other, and from legal conflicts, in which controversies over claims or demands are adjusted by mutually recognized procedures. He also identifies fifth category of conflict, that is war. So Quincy Wright also identifies fifth kind of category of conflict, that is war. For him, war in the legal sense has been characterized by the union of all four types of conflict. So what are these all four types of conflict? Physical, political, ideological, and legal. All these conflict together became, war. So this is what Quincy Wright is classifying. So war is manifested by the physical struggle of armies to occupy the same space, each seeking to annihilate, disarm, and capture the other. By the political struggle of nations to achieve policies against the resistance of others. By the ideological struggle of people to preserve or extend ways of life and value system. And by the legal struggle of states to acquire titles, to vindicate claims, to prevent violence, or to punish offenses by recognized procedures of regulated violence. This was all about Quincy Wright's classification. Now let's move on to Anatole Rappaport's classification. So according to Rappaport, has proposed threefold classification of conflicts. So what are these fold classification? Fights, games, and debates. This is very important. Fights, games, and debates. So their distinguishing criteria are how the opponent is viewed, the intent of the parties, and the rational content of the situation. So in a fight, we are talking here about fight, games, and debates. So in a fight, the opponent is further, and he distinguishes these three kinds of conflicts on the basis of following four criteria. So let's start with the first criteria. So the basis or the starting point of the struggle in all three models of conflict differs from each other. So in the fights, there is a mutual fear or hostility between the parties. In the games, there is agreement between the parties to strive for mutually incompatible goals within the constraint of the certain rules, but not where outcome can be predicted in advance. In the debates, there is disagreement between the